The Oregon Ducks are an absolute football machine right now. Are they going to go into the big house on Saturday afternoon and do what they are programmed to do? Or will the Wolverines push back a little bit and make life a little bit tough for Oregon?
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Oregon will be donning Warp Speed uniforms as they are titled and as they are branded. Similar uniforms as to when they last came into the big house in 2007. Dennis Dixon and company displayed that Warp Speed in a 39-7 drubbing of the Wolverines. And it's ironic, I think, that Warp Speed is the branding behind these uniforms because there's a chance that this game could be over in Warp Speed, just like it was last week when Oregon dismantled the Illinois Fighting Illini. You look at the matchups, you look at the personnel, Oregon has advantages all across the board. That is why they are the number one team in the country. That is why the gap with them being the best team in the country continues to grow week by week by week. I could sit here, I could tell you how much better they are in the trenches. I could tell you how much better that they are in the perimeter. I know that, you know that. We've talked about that here on this channel. But the thing that really pops into my mind when I dive into this preview that I want to tackle first is, how do you slow down the Oregon Ducks in theory? That's what it says on the graphic here for those of you watching on YouTube. But maybe I should have typed out, can you slow down the Oregon Ducks? Because I'm not so sure the answer is yes. I don't think you can slow down this Oregon team the way they are playing on both sides of the football, offense and defense right now. I think offensively, Oregon is going to look to employ a similar strategy early in the game as they did against Illinois. I talked about it in the preview last week. I also talked about it in the reaction last week with Oregon's drubbing of the orange and blue. They needed to get up on Illinois. They need to get them in a hole that they can't climb out of, because when Oregon is able to get that type of advantage on the scoreboard, teams that are playing against them are forced to come out of their game plan. And when Oregon is able to hit those explosive plays early, and often it's game, set, match, sometimes midway through the second quarter, and that's exactly what you saw in that game against Illinois. I think they're going to look to do that, obviously, in this game against the Michigan Wolverines. Illinois is a better offensive football team than Michigan. Michigan is in the 100s. When you look at statistical measures, when you look at analytical measures, this is just plain and simple not a good Michigan offense. I know they played better last week against Michigan State. Davis Warren did not turn the football over, his first start since being pulled early on in the season, but all of that being considered, this is still an offense that is still very, very limited. Michigan is not built to come from behind 7 points late in the first quarter, more or less behind 21 points in the third quarter, and I think that's where Oregon wants to be, and I think that's where Oregon wants to live in this game against the Michigan Wolverines. Now, how do you do it? How do you slow down the Ducks? What do the Michigan Wolverines have to do? First thing, we talk about how Oregon was explosive early on in the game against Illinois. They're going to look to do that against Michigan. You can't let them get that confidence early. How do you keep that confidence at bay? I think really good play from the defensive line. The defensive line for Michigan needs to come up, and they need to come up big in this game. You need to try to create pressure with your front four. Michigan was so good at doing that last season. They've been pretty good this season. They're fourth in the Big Ten in sacks with 21 so far this season. Josiah Stewart needs to have a big game coming off the edge. They need to try to generate pressure from those two future NFL guys in Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham in the middle. It is going to be a tall task because Oregon's offensive line might be one of the best. They are one of the best offensive lines in college football. I will certainly correct myself over there. So they need to try to create pressure. Because if you let Dylan Gabriel sit back there for 2.5 seconds, for 3 seconds, for 4 seconds, and now these routes are able to develop down the field against a Michigan passing defense that just isn't very good, Oregon is going to torch you. They are going to carve you like a Halloween pumpkin. Plain and simple, period. So Michigan needs to play great on the defensive line, I think, for this one to remain competitive as long as they possibly can. Finishing off with the defensive line, we talked about Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. They need to find a way to clog up the middle. They need to find a way to limit this run game, and then I talked about getting pressure off the edge. I think those are two things that really need to work for Michigan, for them to at least slow down Oregon within that game. Like I said, that is going to be a tall challenge considering how Oregon likes to get the quick passing game involved, how good that their offensive line is. But hey, this is what the game plan needs to be. This is what Michigan needs to execute to be able to get this thing done. Now, I talked about Graham and Grant clogging up the middle. This is a Michigan run defense that hasn't been great the last 2 weeks. They allowed 163 yards against Michigan State last week, 187 yards against Illinois a couple of weeks ago. That's 175 yards per game allowed on the ground the last 2 games. Oregon can do it any way they choose to do it, and they have been running the football well really all season, but certainly the last 2 weeks have been really good for the Ducks. 229 yards rushing versus Illinois, 131 versus the Boilermakers. That's 180 yards per game. I think Oregon can line up. I think Oregon can run the football. Even if Graham and Grant are doing their thing, they can go off tackle. They can get to the outside. They've got the speed to get to the perimeter. Watch out for Kenyon Sadiq to maybe get involved with some jet sweeps and really creativity in the run game as well. So even if Michigan is able to do that, even if they are able to clog that up, Oregon can get their run game going and get it involved in so many different ways. And then last thing, that what Michigan needs to do to try to slow down Oregon in this game, they need a healthy Will Johnson. Will Johnson was out in the game against Michigan State. He's had some injury issues this season. Now, Oregon has all kinds of weapons on the perimeter. Having Will Johnson will help, but that's not going to certainly solve the problem. But if Will Johnson can lock down on maybe Oregon's top receiver, they can get pressure from the outside, they can clog the middle. These are all things that Michigan needs to do to slow down Oregon. It is going to be a tall task considering what I've seen from Oregon this season and also considering what I've seen from the Michigan Wolverines this season. Now, another way to slow down Oregon is to have them not possess the football. Michigan needs to monster mash in this game. They need to run the football. They need to extend drives. They need to dominate the time of possession. This is a Wolverines offense that has been fairly one-dimensional this season, and that one dimension needs to play out of this dimension. It is going to be a difficult task going up against that Oregon front, that defense. I'll talk about that defense here in just a minute. But I think the really big thing that I'm focusing on is Michigan needs to find a way to replicate those explosive runs, those 20-plus yard runs, 30-plus yard runs, 40-plus yard runs that they were able to get in the Minnesota game and that they were able to get in the USC game. This is a Michigan offense that is not going to be able to consistently run the football against the Oregon Ducks. That's why getting those explosive plays throughout the course of a football game are very important. When you get a 30 and 40-yard run, maybe you follow it up with a no gain or a -1, but you still move the football down the field a little bit. If Michigan can't create those explosive runs, they are going to run into trouble. They are going to be getting close to nothing on the offensive side of the football. So being able to do that, keep Oregon's defense out there for an extended period of time is going to be a key for the Michigan Wolverines. Maybe they can get some play action game going because eventually, and I'll talk about this in just a little bit, I think Oregon is going to come down. They're going to stack the box, right? So they need to be able to get some sort of play action game going. But for the play action to be a threat, the run game needs to be able to be a threat at first. And having success for Michigan on offense is going to be an extremely tall task because this is a dominant Ducks defense. They are really coming into their own right now. Despite the injury, despite Jordan Birch not being able to play, maybe one of their best defensive players right now for Oregon, I think Michigan will not be able to throw the ball, period. We knew Jabbar Muhammad was going to be a great corner coming into the season. Nico Reed on the other side has been playing really good football, maybe played his best game of his Ducks career in that game against Illinois. He covered well. He was just on Illinois receivers like glue. He came up to the line of scrimmage. He made some really good tackles as well. You look at what Michigan wants to do. They want to play that smash football. I talk about the monster mash. I talk about running the football, and that's what Michigan needs to do. This is not a pass game that's going to be ultra effective. I think the only really pass game threat that Michigan has in this game is the tight end Colston Loveland. I'm not sure if he's going to have that Tyler Warren against USC a type of performance, and I think that's what needs to happen for Michigan to have any semblance of a passing game. It is going to be extremely difficult for these wide receivers to get going against these lockdown corners that the Oregon Ducks have right now. I talked about how Michigan needs to run the football. It is going to be a big-time challenge, maybe the biggest challenge that Michigan has had so far this season. Derek Harmon, former Michigan State Spartan, you know he's going to be ready to go for this one in the big house. Jamari Caldwell, there's some big bodies up front. And Michigan's offensive line, certainly not as good as it has been in years past. The consistency of the run game, I just don't see it happening for Michigan throughout this game. Secondary is going to lock down. I think the D-line is going to push back on the other side of the line of scrimmage. This is a deep linebacker room as well. Devin Jackson's playing really good football. Bryce Betcher, Jeffrey Bassa. There's all kinds of guys in that linebacker room that I think have been playing really well and that are going to continue to play really well for Oregon right now. I anticipate the Ducks just coming up to the line of scrimmage, bringing everybody up, trusting their corners on the outside that have been locked down this year and say, hey, we dare you to throw the football. We know you're not going to. We know you're going to want to run the football in this game, and we're going to come up to stop it. We're better at all levels of this defense, and we're going to dare you to make plays over the top. I don't think Michigan is going to be able to make those plays over the top. And I think whether it's Oregon or anybody else, that's how you defend Michigan, by forcing them to throw the football. You've seen how that has played out in some of the Wolverine losses this season. All right, folks. Prediction time. The final score of that game in 2007, I think, is just going to be a point here and a point there in this game. It was 37-9 back then. I've got 38-10, the final score for the Oregon Ducks. I think they're going to get explosive early on. I think they can get over the top of this Michigan secondary. I think they're going to stack the box. I don't think Michigan is going to have an ultra great day running the football. Could they get some? Could Kaleo Mullins get some? Yeah, maybe, but I just don't think they're going to be able to do it consistently against this dominant Ducks defense that has been playing really well as of late. I see the Ducks winning. I see them easily covering. Win big for the Oregon Ducks, and they keep it rolling. That's my prediction. I want to hear your score predictions in the comments below. Will the Ducks keep rolling, or can Michigan give them a fight at the Big House? Leave all of that in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.